Change of plans. The U.S. bishops begin their three-day meeting in Baltimore. Why they won't be voting on any steps to address clergy sex abuse. Protecting children. The head of the Vatican's Commission on Keeping Minors Safe from Misconduct joins us. Weekend in Paris. A recap of President Trump's tumultuous visit to honor the anniversary of the end of World War I. And remembering veterans. Several members of the Trump administration joined lawmakers for a somber ceremony. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, November 12th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Tonight, the Vatican has thwarted efforts by U.S. bishops to release a concrete plan dealing with clergy sex abuse crisis here in the U.S. The church came under scrutiny this summer with the release of a grand jury report from Pennsylvania that found more than 300 priests had abused 1,000 children over 7 decades. In July, Theodore McCarrick resigned from the College of Cardinals following allegations of misconduct. Bishops had promised a vote on sex abuse reform at this week's annual meeting, but now they must wait until a Vatican-called meeting in February. And we are awaiting the release of the letter from the Vatican to the bishops. We have team coverage from Baltimore. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby is outside the conference watching protests. And we begin with Jason Calvi, who has spent the day inside the annual fall meeting in Baltimore. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. The U.S. bishops met for just an hour before going to a day of prayer. They plan to vote on 2 proposals, a code of conduct for bishops and a special commission to investigate allegations against them. One bishop tells me the changes are like getting punched in the gut. The president of the U.S. bishops, Cardinal Daniel DiNardo of Galveston, Houston, apologizes for the last-minute change.
At the insistence of the Holy See, we will not be voting on the 2 action items in our documentation regarding the abuse crisis.
They delay voting on bishops' accountability until after the Global Vatican Summit on clergy abuse in February.
Although I am disappointed that we will not be taking these actions tomorrow in terms of vote, I remain hopeful that this additional consultation will ultimately improve our response to the crisis we face.
The bishops spend the rest of the day as scheduled.
Hail Mary, full of grace.
In prayer.
My story can't cover all of the suicides and the addictions.
Where survivors of abuse share their heartbreak.
The heart of the church is broken, and you need to fix this now. The betrayal by my abuser is compounded by an ongoing betrayal realized by the church every time it treats its victims as liabilities, every time they are called money grubbers and treated as dishonest adversaries.
I pressed the Bishop of Burlington, Vermont about Catholics who are disappointed.
I can understand how they're frustrated because those of us who were in the room this morning at 9 o'clock when it was first announced were just as frustrated as Cardinal DiNardo was, mainly in a lot of ways because of the last-minute announcement of it, but also because we're ready to act, we're ready to do what we need to do, and as soon as we can, we're going to do everything that we can.
He tells me bishops will still act in their own diocese. This is the first day of this national gathering of bishops. This crisis erupted this summer with allegations against former Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. Lauren? If the bishops aren't voting on these accountability measures now, when will they vote? After the conference in February? Yeah, so there'll be a international gathering at the Vatican on sex abuse in February, so it'll be sometime after that. Chicago's Cardinal Blaise Cupich suggests sometime in March. Correspondent Jason Calvi in Baltimore. Thank you, Jason. Many survivors of clergy sex abuse say they are furious the bishops are not voting on new measures against abuse. They say the bishops need to be held accountable. And correspondent Wyatt Goolsby has been talking to victims who gathered outside the hotel today. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Survivors and their supporters tell me meetings are good, prayers are good, but the bishops need to take action. And some protesters are going as far as to call for all the bishops to resign. Bishops aren't the only ones who have traveled from across the country to talk about the clergy abuse crisis. Victims and their families have come to Baltimore to demand the bishops clean up their act. Peter Isley, who was sexually assaulted by a priest as a child, is a member of the group Ending Clergy Abuse. He says he and others are upset about the Vatican's request not to vote this week on clergy abuse-related issues.
There's nothing here that they were going to do that they cannot vote on, and they have to. So that is a terrible, terrible message right now to send the public, and I think American Catholics, that we are again going to delay, push off, kick the can forward, and not take responsibility for what we've done.
And outside the hotel, signs calling on bishops to protect the most vulnerable, children. John McKeon traveled from New York with one message: repent and resign. He's not a victim himself, but he says he believes not enough has been done over the past several decades to hold bishops accountable for past cover-ups.
I think that the bishops need to repent. They need to have a change of heart and put themselves in the shoes of the survivors. And I think there are many ways to serve the Lord. They can resign and do many other things as priests. But as a symbol of repentance for those people who've been abused, I think they all need to resign, and we need new leadership.
McKeon says he was warned by security to stop placing notes for bishops around the hotel calling for their resignation. Security has been especially tight. All of our EWTN crews covering the conference have noticed the increase. We are only allowed to film inside one room in the hotel, and that's compared to years past where the bishops were much more accessible. Lauren?
Wyatt, victims of clergy abuse have told me that they often feel very isolated, even from within the church. What did protesters tell you they want to see happen to fix that problem?
Well, Lauren, of course, protesters don't have a unified solution. Some say that, of course, all the bishops should resign. Others say that the bishops need to come out and simply listen to them, listen to activist groups, and talk to them when they come out holding signs like at events like these. So, but they all agree on the problem that you stated, which is this feeling of isolation among victims. And so they agree that the bishops have not done enough to address this particular problem for a long-run solution. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reporting from Baltimore. Thank you, Wyatt. Joining me now from Baltimore is Bishop Michael Burbidge of the Diocese of Arlington. Your Excellency, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Lauren. Good to speak with you today.
This gathering was billed as a forum to address clergy sex abuse, including a discussion of a code of conduct for bishops. Were you surprised by the Vatican's request to delay any votes until after the global meeting in February?
I was surprised to hear that this morning. The bishops all learned that at the same time, around 9 o'clock this morning. That was the first it was mentioned to us. So yes, I was surprised.
Why do you think it was?
It was explained to us that the Holy Father wants more global discussion before we take any vote. And so, as you know, in February, he is calling the heads of all the bishops' conferences from around the world to meet with him. And the Holy Father has decided that he wants that discussion to take place, which we might be enriched by before we take a vote. It does not in any way discontinue our moving forward this week in the discussion of those items. It just will not be a vote.
In our News Nightly poll, our exclusive poll, when we asked for Catholics' opinions of how the U.S. bishops have handled allegations of clergy sex abuse, 56% of those Catholics surveyed said the bishops have done a fair or poor job. Do you think that this is a missed opportunity to respond to lay people who have been demanding action?
I assure you that the bishops came into this meeting knowing that action is required, and we are going to continue on that path. The first action, of course, is to remain as we have been since 2002, following the charter and the essential norms that we approved. We understand coming into this meeting that a new mechanism for holding bishops accountable and providing greater guidance, especially through lay people, those things are essential, and we want to continue on that path. So there will be robust discussion in the next couple of days, just as that was planned. The only thing different is that formal vote. But our discussion, our desire, our commitment to move forward are all very much present. We understand that that is necessary. We understand that is what our lay faithful very much are desiring to see from us.
Today, you and your brother bishops have been hearing the testimony of clergy abuse victims, and we've reported that groups representing survivors are also upset by this delay. What is your message to them?
Well, first of all, to hear from two survivors this morning in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament was very, very powerful, very moving. The speakers who spoke to us spoke clearly from their hearts and on behalf of all victims. And their courage, their sincerity were so inspiring. My brother bishops and I welcome always the opportunity to meet with victims. We do so frequently in our own diocese. But to hear these two speakers speak to the body of bishops today was very powerful. It was also very challenging to hear their stories, to hear the consequences of the abuse, not only on themselves but on their families. Made us come face to face with the horrific consequences of such abuse that we so sadly and acknowledge and forever continue to offer our extreme heartfelt apologies and renewed commitment to do everything humanly possible to eradicate such abuse moving forward. So I assure the victims that your voice was so well represented today through these two courageous individuals, and the bishops listened attentively, and again renew our commitment that today's decision not to take a vote on new action items does in no way detract from our commitment for greater accountability and transparency.
Thank you so much, Bishop Michael Burbidge of the Diocese of Arlington. We appreciate your thoughts. I know many people are now looking forward to actions. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much, Lauren.
And now we turn to the Vatican to learn how the Church on a global scale is working to safeguard children and adults from abuse. We are joined from Rome by Father Hans Zollner, head of the Center for Child Protection and a member of the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors. Father, in your opinion, having been involved in this commission, why has the Vatican asked the U.S. bishops to wait?
I think one explanation for this might be that there should be a consistent approach to all what concerns allegations of mishandling and of cover-up. I think this is my explanation I have of this news that is quite fresh now.
Clergy sex abuse is dominating headlines, as you're pointing out, not just in our country here, but when it comes to the abuse of minors around the world. Give us a snapshot of what progress has been made, for example, in Germany.
Now, in Germany, we started to talk about this issue not even 9 years ago in the public, and very few things had happened before. The German bishops had offered much sympathy to victims. There was some contact, there were some listening sessions. They had established their guidelines, but for 8 years, from 2002, when the Boston Spotlight revelations came out, until 2010, when in Germany the public opinion turned very much to this issue, not much had happened. Since 2010, though, the German bishops have established a very thorough network of safeguarding measures and personnel. They have introduced codes of conduct. They have intervention and prevention officers trained and implemented in every single diocese. Every person who works with youth, either in parishes or schools, either professionally or in a voluntary capacity, have to undergo training. So this is very consistent, and it follows the path that in the US, in Canada, in Ireland, or in the UK or Australia, the churches have taken. So much has been done, much needs still to be done, but in the at least in those countries, much has happened until now.
Right, you travel across the globe, and part of your job is to hold seminars and conferences on child protection like you're talking about. How do you measure the effectiveness of your courses?
Now, we measure them, for example, by the number of applicants for our diploma course in safeguarding that we have established here at the Center for Child Protection of the Pontifical Gregorian University. They come from those countries which I have visited before, generally, especially in those countries where there is already a certain level of awareness, like in Papua New Guinea or in Thailand, where I've been over the last months and years. People come, bishops are convinced that they need personnel that is competent, that is trained.
That's all the time we have, Father, for this very important topic. I know that the conference, Bishops Worldwide, will happen in February. Thank you so much for joining us. Father Hans Zollner, president of the Center for Child Protection at the Gregorian University in Rome.
Thank you very much.
President Trump challenges world leaders to pay for American military protection and reach fair trade agreements. He has just returned from meetings in Paris, where he marked the 100th anniversary of the armistice that ended World War I.
Great warriors they are, who gave everything for family, country, God, and freedom.
President Trump's America First policies don't sit well with French President Emmanuel Macron. He lectured Trump and other leaders, world leaders, on the dangers of nationalist isolation. Vice President Mike Pence will represent America at this week's meetings with Asian leaders. His first stop, Tokyo. On the agenda with Japanese leaders, North Korea, China, and trade. President Trump also asked the vice president to take his place at 2 regional summits in Singapore and Papua New Guinea. Recounts in Florida and races for governor and the U.S. Senate continue. All 67 counties must be completed by Thursday. A lot of early drama is focused on Broward County. A judge said he's seen no evidence of wrongdoing in the Democrat-heavy region. He also says both sides need to, quote, ramp down the rhetoric. Republican Governor Rick Scott filed 3 lawsuits accusing the supervisor in Broward of counting ballots after the deadline. Republicans lead both races by less than half of a percentage point. Fake images circulate on social media of acquitted Catholic woman Asia Bibi leaving Pakistan. Bibi was released from prison after 8 years on death row for blasphemy. Death threats have made against her and a lawmaker. Bibi is in Pakistan until a review process is completed. More than 250,000 people gather in Poland to celebrate Independence Day. Yesterday was the 100th anniversary of the country's rebirth as an independent state after World War I. Attendees included the president and other top officials. Nationalist groups were among those participating in the march. Poland is 88% Catholic. Coming up, Al Kresta joins us from Baltimore on the U.S. Bishop's stunning delay of voting for measures to combat clergy sex abuse. Back to our top story tonight. The Vatican has asked the U.S. Bishops' Conference to delay voting on measures to combat clergy sex abuse. But the topic remained on the agenda. One survivor described to the bishops her feelings of anguish.
The Lord has cried more tears on his cross because of some decisions that some of you have made. I don't know how you bear it. My heart breaks.
Teresa Pitt-Green also says she is praying for the bishops and plans to spend her life trying to help survivors. Joining me now is Al Kresta, president and CEO of Ave Maria Radio and board member of the group No More Victims, a nonprofit coalition of lay Catholics who seek to help victims of clergy sex abuse. And he's also the host of Kresta in the Afternoon, heard on EWTN. Welcome to the broadcast.
Lauren, good to be with you. Thanks for the invitation.
Today's request from the Holy See to delay voting on concrete measures to address clergy sex abuse puts the bishops as a whole in a pretty difficult spot, it would seem to me, with victims and lay people alike who are now questioning the sense of urgency on the part of the church to provide remedy. What are your listeners saying about this crisis? Is this another blow to credibility?
It's absolutely a blow to credibility. It appears to be. motives are always difficult to get at. So let me just say what it appears to be. It appears to be a slapdown. The U.S. bishops know that they appear to have the moral authority now of Bill Cosby, and they're anxious, they're generally good people who want to, again, regain the trust of Catholics in the world. And they took some initiative here, Cardinal DiNardo offering leadership, and to learn yesterday afternoon that their intention to come up with policy was simply not acceptable to the Holy See is shocking. I don't know any multinational corporation whose leaders would converge for a week of conference on a major problem, and then all of a sudden at the last minute have the chairman of the board or its CEO all of a sudden belittle the leaders, the top leadership of the corporation with this kind of thing. I have no idea what's going on here, except I noticed that Cardinal Cupich jumped up and took authority, apparently positioning himself for some future influence. And obviously he knew what was coming up. That was not a spontaneous act on his part.
Let's just talk, Al, about the bishops now taking action in their own diocese. What would you like to see happen, say, in your diocese in Lansing, where the Michigan Attorney General has launched an investigation into all 7 dioceses in the state?
Yes. Well, I've actually spoken to our bishops about this in Lansing and Detroit. I think as a layman who's working in the new evangelization and talking regularly with Catholics, I think that we have to have a public reckoning of all clergy who have been engaged in misconduct, not just criminal sexual misconduct. There's also a wide swath of clergy who have been engaging in both heterosexual and homosexual misbehavior. And I'm not talking here about some fellow who falls off the wagon one night and gets involved in a fling. I'm talking about people who on a regular basis are involved in sexual misconduct. Those names have to be published as well. Again, there has to be public evidence that there's offense here, but priests are not private individuals. They are those who hear our confessions. They are central to the establishment of parish life. And when they, again, violate their promise of abstinence, that's not the same as a layman who commits adultery, for instance. The priest is functioning publicly as in persona Christi. He's functioning as the builder of that parish community. And I've asked our bishops to make sure that all, not only the criminal miscreants, are listed, date, offense, disposition of the case. Any victims who wanted their names published could be published as well. But I also think those who are engaged in sexual misconduct and who violate the trust of the people of God should be listed as well.
And that could be something that could be done on the local level. All right, Al Kresta, President and CEO of Ave Maria Radio, thank you so much for your thoughts.
All right, Lauren, thank you.
At least 31 people are dead in wildfires raging in both ends of California. Search teams are looking for more than 200 people who are missing. They are working mostly in Paradise in Northern California, a town of nearly 30,000 people that has largely been destroyed. In Southern California, nearly 400 homes have been lost to the flames. Up next, Pope Francis delivers a message of peace, and the White House announces the newest Medal of Freedom recipients, including the King of Rock and Roll.
Investiamo sulla pace, non sulla guerra.
Pope Francis called on the faithful to invest in peace, not in war, during Sunday's Angelus. The Holy Father did make reference to the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. 17 million people were killed during that war that ended in 1918. A somber ceremony for Veterans Day at Arlington National Cemetery included several members of the Trump administration. Secretary for Veterans Affairs Robert Wilkie laid the wreath at the annual ceremony at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers. Other attendees included Defense Secretary James Mattis, Representative Nancy Pelosi, and Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen. Finally tonight, President Trump announces his first recipients of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Honorees include the king of rock and roll himself, Elvis Presley, Babe Ruth, and other people with ties to Catholicism. The late Supreme Court Justice, Catholic Antonin Scalia, believed the Constitution did not guarantee the right to abortion or same-sex marriage. Former NFL quarterback Roger Staubach, also Catholic, he's credited with first using the phrase Hail Mary to describe a last-second attempt at victory. And former state Supreme Court Justice Alan Page played pro football and graduated from a Catholic high school and the University of Notre Dame. The Presidential Medal of Freedom is the nation's highest honor for a civilian. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night and God bless you.